Plaza Premium Automobiles. Now, live from the Malamut Associate Law Studios, the Adam Malamut Show, hosted by Adam Malamut.
In the Delaware Valley, what a great night to come to the Delaware Valley live from Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Great day down at the yard today. Ryan Howard enjoyed his retirement in front of the sellout crowd down at Citizens Bank Park. Adam, I know you were in the building or you were down at the stadium today for that. What a great day. What a great run that Ryan Howard had when he was here, and it was great to watch today.
Ryan Howard bobbleheads as well.
Oh, nice.
So
how many of those you get? You got one?
We got a few of them. I'm not sure how many of them will actually make it into my house. But we left the park with a few of them.
Yeah.
You know, once I tell my wife that we're bringing in more bobbleheads, there's probably going to be a somebody standing by the door.
How was the speech, by the way? It was good.
You know, we were a little bit late getting into the park, but it was great to see a packed park there, especially after the past couple of games. Boy, man, after the All-Star break, these guys are killing us. For somebody who bleeds Philadelphia sports, to see them, struggling like they are, today was an awesome win. But having a packed park for a guy who meant so much to this team, and the fans got cold on Ryan Howard towards the end of his career here, but you can't deny the value that he brought to that, World Series run.
Yeah, what a great team, what a great run, what a great couple of seasons that he put together. Really, really impactful, really significant, and a good win today. The much needed win because the big, I can't say red hot Dodgers are coming into town. They cooled a little bit, but they'll be in town starting tomorrow night. That transitions into a Sunday night live edition of the Adam Malamut Show here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Nice to be in the studio. Look at a big show tonight.
I'm excited. It's what better day to do it? It's a beautiful day outside. We're right in the midst of an amazing summer. But before we get started, Krause, there's something really important I want to talk about. Our show is going to be an interesting show tonight. We're going to be talking about some very hot topics, but a topic that we really need to all be conscious of and really put our hearts into is, I want to ask our listeners to keep the people and the communities affected by Hurricane Barry in their thoughts and prayers. In recent years, I feel our country has taken a step backwards in so many different ways. One of them is empathy, care, consideration, concern we show others. We've kind of lost that united sense that, I thought that we were starting to pick up so well, especially after we've experienced other tragedies. As my two children, Ava and Chase, are standing inside the studio for the first time, it's important for us to regain these values. It's important for us to share these values with our younger generation and make sure that they understand we need to take care of our neighbors. We need to take a step forward in unifying and making sure that our brothers and sisters, as they battle yet another natural disaster in their community down in the Gulf region, they feel our support. So again, I'd ask our listeners to please be mindful of what the folks are going through with what will hopefully be a anticipated and underperforming storm. But it's a great opportunity to reach out and help our neighbors. So tonight, Krause, we're going to talk sports. You led off talking about the baseball game, and sports is one of my favorite topics. We're not going to talk X's and O's. We're going to talk about...
We're not going to talk about your VIP seats at Citizens Bank Park, your end zone seats at the Link.
Oh, here we go.
Your courtside seats for the Sixers.
You got to stop.
Center ice for the Flyers.
I can see
all good.
I can see the text messages starting to roll in asking for ticket requests right now.
No, I love it.
But, listen, 4 for 4. I'm a Philly guy through and through. We're going to talk about legal issues in sports. We're going to talk about the way sports are sometimes used to develop legal issues, used to publicize legal issues, and used to really get in front of legal issues. This is a great time of year for sports, We're talking baseball. What an epic win between two of the greatest tennis players of my generation of all time today in Wimbledon. Djokovic pulling off the win. My wife was rooting very hard for Federer, but two gentlemen. We're midway through the baseball season. We've got crazy NBA free agency this year. We've got the start of NFL training camps, and I think that I saw today we're 58 days away from opening day. We've got the PGA Tour. Last week had an amazing UFC card, and without a doubt, my favorite event this year, and I think I told you before the show, Krause, since the Eagles Super Bowl win, my favorite sporting event was the U.S. Women's National Team World Cup win. And God, if that didn't leave you feeling, like I can't even describe it. I mean, my household is a sports household, but the amount of emotion that we had watching that win was incredible. So with sports capturing headlines, more for wins and losses, we really want to focus on the serious legal and social issues that so often get drowned out by the scores. For that reason, tonight's guest is a certified NFL Players Association and NHL Players Association player agent. He's negotiated hundreds of millions of dollars in player contracts, represented athletes in a variety of legal matters, ranging from arbitrations to appearances before international governing bodies. He's a visiting sports law professor at both Rutgers Law and my alma mater, Temple University School of Law. You see how I kind of, put the inflection in and make sure that my school got a little bit of extra pub on that.
By the way, they're going to have a good football team this year, but that's for another conversation.
100%.
Yes, sir.
And we have tickets for that as well, Krause, since you're putting my business out there. He was a governor's appointee for the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, DVRPC, and a lot of people don't realize the importance of that, and we'll save that for another show, but that's a very significant appointment. And he also served on the board of directors for the New Jersey Sports Hall of Fame. So, longtime friend, and now our newest addition to the team at Malamut Associates. My friend, welcome, Jerrold Colton.
Great to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I'm humbled by that. Thank you.
So, Jerrold, let's dive right in. Let's talk about the U.S. Women's National Team and equal pay. I've always been of the mindset that advertising dollars are the real revenue sources for sports. How is it that all these advertisers allow this issue to exist?
It's a complex issue, Adam, because of the fact that we're dealing with both United States law, United States sports, and worldwide. And it's not just based on things that, you can look at the women versus the men and say, well, geez, A, it should be equal, and B, the women have been far more successful in the United States. But we have collectively bargained agreements between the United States women and United States men with the national governing body for the United States Soccer Federation, but the pool money that goes out for the World Cups, which the United States just won for the fourth time in 2 decades, where the men haven't gotten ever further than the Final 16, and they win again, and the excitement and the revenue and everything derived in this country is huge, yet the amount of payout to the female athletes is so far less than it is to the men. And it really is a fair outcry that there has to be balance. And the United States recognizes its own federation, and they have to get the international governing body, if they're going to participate with them, to recognize it as well and to share the wealth a little bit more equally, because the revenues are there for the women's game now in soccer, and about 1 billion people worldwide watch that championship game. So it's great to both dominate on the field, but there has to be some sort of fairness to compensate the athletes off it.
It's interesting. We've heard both sides of the argument, and we've seen sponsors inject themselves. For example, Luna Bar added $31,250 roster bonuses for each of the players in the U.S. Women's National Team. Secret Deodorant added $23,000 to bridge the pay gap. But why should it be these sponsors doing it when the league and the organizations are making so much money? Why shouldn't they be paid directly from those organizations?
It's complex on that because I agree, and I'm glad to see the sponsors step up because they're the people that are putting the revenue into the sport. And basically, what pays player salaries are the revenues from sports leagues, or if in the case of individual sports that the advertisers pay in with. And in most cases, it's the television money, Adam. In this case, it's such a complex formula because the significant amount of pay that goes for the World Cup Championship comes from the international governing body and not from the United States itself. And the actual revenues for the female soccer league here, the National Women's Soccer League, pale in comparison to the men's league. Now, after World Cup victories, hopefully you see an upswing in that. They actually just got a contract with ESPN to televise the remainder of their season, which is great. That will pump more revenue and hopefully raise salaries. But they really do have to supplement these things with the outside sources that you've mentioned and the advertisers who support both the women's soccer team as well as women's products and want to see that there is some sort of equality. Listen, Adam, we are so far ahead of the rest of the world in so many ways here, but that's part of the problem as to why it's not equal pay. They don't look at it the same way we do. We've been progressive in this country with equality issues. Title IX that came down and was passed as part of educational reform in 1972, so we're closing on 50 years of Title IX, has advanced women's sports so far, but clearly we have so much further to go.
You know the irony, so Secret is owned by Procter & Gamble, and Procter & Gamble pay women in the UK 30% of what they pay men. 30%. So here you have a brand that's owned by probably one of the largest brands in the world that is stepping up. It feels like a PR grab. And while I appreciate the fact that they're stepping in, the accountability really falls on these folks, the advertisers, to hold these leagues responsible, right?
Well, there's no question that there's a lot of responsibility here to make sure that this issue gets taken care of. Number one to me, Adam, is United States Soccer Federation. They have to support the women's team. Now, the actual pay between the men and the women's isn't that much different for the national team based on the United States. Where it really is different is based on the world pool that comes into play and the money for the World Cup. They actually have the pool of money that went to the men in 2018, last year's World Cup in Russia to the winners, was $400 million. The amount of pool that went to the women's was something like $70 million. We're talking a fraction of the amount of money goes to women.
Well, we're going to go to break in a minute, but before we go to break, I just want to say Secret came up with a great quote. They said, be on the right side. They want the U.S. women's national team to be on the right side of this. So hopefully they hear the call. But with that being said, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Carly Lloyd.
This is the Adam Malamut Show here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, live on a Sunday night as we come to the Delaware Valley. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion. Back in a moment.
Original news stories, podcasts, columns from your favorite hosts, and more. Interact 24/7 at Facebook.com/1210WPHT. The Adam Malamut Show. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion.
If we show emotion, we're called dramatic. If we want to play against men, we're nuts. And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we stand for something, we're unhinged.
It's Sue Bird's gonna need to calm down.
When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical, irrational, or just being crazy. But a woman running a marathon was crazy.
Officials tried to pull her off the course.
A woman boxing was crazy. A woman dunking? Crazy. Coaching an NBA team? Crazy. A woman competing in a hit job, changing her sport, landing a double cork 1080, or winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming back for more? Crazy, 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 and crazy.
Sunday night, it's the Adam Malamut Show here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, along with Jerrold Colton. I'm Joe Kraus. This is the Adam Malamut Show. Adam?
I absolutely love that commercial. So that commercial that we just listened to I found on Carly Lloyd's Instagram page. Carly has been at the forefront of talking about equality in women's sports. And I'm not trying to promote Carly's Instagram page, although I guess I am in a sense. But if you visit Carly Lloyd's Instagram page, amongst the other things that are awesome and inspiring is that Nike Crazy ad. And there's also a Dream With Us Nike commercial. Luna Bar has an ad on there. I mean, these are all really empowering. So,
and by the way, I thought it was real significant in New York at the celebration where she gave the Fly Eagles Fly. How awesome was that?
Incredible. And, you know, there's nothing better than somebody who...
Real, Adam.
100%. And, you know, she recognizes her roots. You know, she feels a great sense of obligation to this community. She feels, you know, this is a very amazing time in her life. She played in 4 World Cups. I mean, you're talking about 16 years of World Cup play. That's amazing. I don't know of any other woman who has done it at that level, with this level of, you know, with the wins and the success. I mean, it's tremendous. Jerrold, how do we stop talking about all these great things that the celebrities are putting forward and get them to actually become reality? How do we affect the change?
Well, I think the change is happening, maybe not as quickly as we'd like to see. On the Carly Lloyd note, you know, a local girl from South Jersey and Rutgers, get that back at you for Temple. But she's such a Philadelphia sports fan. I took a picture with her at a Sixers playoff game. I put that on my Instagram and my Facebook this week. I got more reaction to that picture than anything.
At a Sixers game?
I took it with her at a Sixers game. I had never posted it, so she was wearing a Philly Sixers playoff shirt, so I put it up there after her shout out that Krause just referenced.
That's great.
And you know, her Philly roots are deep, and she's there supporting all the other teams. But I think the change has happened in a large extent. You know, we are talking about women's sports, and they are gaining attention, and the quality of play has risen so dramatically. Personally, I love watching women's soccer. I really do, and I think it's one of the sports that is so entertaining. So I think the respect is getting there. When you listen to that ad that you just ran, the Nike ad, you know, all those things talk about running a marathon for a woman was unheard of. That's in the 70s. They actually tried to rip the first woman trying to run it off the course because they, you know, God forbid, a woman ran in it. So we've made so much progress. There's still so much more to go. And like we spoke about last segment, the big one is in the area of pay.
So we could talk about that issue for hours, and I'd like to have a show and come back, and who knows, maybe we can even get Carly on one of the shows. I'd like to talk about the difference between men and women's sports and what we can do to really affect the change, because I'm tired of hearing people talk about we need change, we need change, we need change. We need to make the change. We need to create the change. Moving on to another hot topic, legalization of marijuana. So we know that in a number of states, it's already been legalized. We know that medical marijuana has been legalized in a number of states. You and I have talked in the office about the complications of the legal complications from a labor law standpoint across the board to motor vehicle laws of how it's going to be regulated. In sports, there are collective bargaining agreements. And I guess before we go forward with marijuana and talking about legalization, what's a collective bargaining agreement?
It's the agreement between basically the workers and the employers that govern pretty much all the rules and wages that the employees get. In a nutshell, that's what it is. It's way more complex than that, of course.
So dovetailing in with legalization of marijuana, every league has different rules as it relates to what's allowed, what's not allowed. What give some examples. What are the rules that you're aware of? NFL, NHL, how are those leagues handling marijuana?
Well, going back a few years, it was said that, and now, you've mentioned how marijuana has become legal in many states in this country, and there's sweeping changes. like anything else, it takes a little while till it gets all across the board. But we're on the way to marijuana in certain forms probably being legal in the United States throughout it. But in sports, it was said a few years back that marijuana was illegal everywhere in the United States except for Alaska and the NBA, because it was thought of that the NBA did not test for it and did not punish because there was worries that you wouldn't be able to field even 5 guys on a court if you did. Certain leagues look at things differently. The NFL has always had the toughest laws rules as far as drugs and enforcing those than of any of the sports. However, they have now really made their cause to be performance-enhancing drugs, steroids and things like that. So there's once a year they test for marijuana, and they tell you when it's going to be. It generally has been, ironically, on April 20th, on 4/20 is the testing date. So basically, players, it's been said that it's more of an intelligence test than an actual drug test. But players still fail it. They don't suspend them, though. They put them in a program. You have to have many, many violations in order to get taken out for marijuana. So it's something that is sort of accepted that we're going to allow this to a certain extent because it's not really performance enhancing. However, with regard to where it really becomes a very significant thing are things called CBDs. It's the oils and the things that come from the hemp plant that can be used therapeutically for healing and some other things and calming. And that's where medical marijuana comes in. And one of my former clients, a guy named Riley Cote, who was a enforcer with the Flyers going back just a few years. This is his cause. This is his life. He's dedicated himself. Athletes Who Care is his organization. Todd Herman's former Eagles involved, and a whole bunch of others. And they're doing sweeping things to try to spread the word on this. And one of their biggest causes, Adam, is the fact that the athletes take painkillers and need to because they're always injured, continue to have to play and perform through injuries, through being in pain. And unfortunately, we have an epidemic of opiates in this country that are often linked to painkillers. And so there's a big outcry that these CBDs and using the hemp plant therapeutically would actually be advantageous for pain-killing remedies as compared to what is currently prescribed. And you saw Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, saying that they are looking into it. So I think we're going to have, and Adam Silver said it as well, the commissioner of the NBA. So hopefully as time goes on, we'll see more acceptance of these things, but they need to know the science a little better because we are at the tip of the iceberg of the legalization of these things.
So one of the issues with CBD oil is it's not regulated, right?
That's the problem when I say we're at the tip of the iceberg.
So,
what do you mean not regulated?
The FDA doesn't approve it.
Yeah, so it's listed as a supplement, but you don't really know exactly what you're getting in a CBD oil because no one's looking into it. The company, the manufacturer, could put anything they want, and these manufacturers have popped up all over in people's garages as well.
And what's the greatest defense? And let's talk about performance-enhancing supplements. What's the greatest defense players have? I had no idea what was in it, right?
See, that's not the defense because you're absolutely held strictly liable for anything you put in your body. So when you put something in your body, you've got to find out, and it's hard to find out. It used to be you could go to your trainer, the trainer could call up the league, but now the things are being derived all the time. I don't know if they'd have the right answer for you.
Yeah, but CBD oil, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure I understand it. CBD oil, as of right now, at 6:30 on a Sunday night, is legal to buy. It's legal to use. Whether it's in oil or a pill form. It's not illegal to do that.
It is not. But the problem becomes, in the stuff that the CBD comes from is a different part of the hemp plant than marijuana, which is the active ingredient is THC. What Adam's pointing out is they don't really know the percentage of THC that might be in some of these CBDs that could actually cause you to get a positive test, even though you're using it for a therapeutic reason.
And when I said the first defense, I think those were the words I used. I didn't say the best defense.
Okay.
So what we know is, that argument doesn't fly. Ignorance isn't a defense. And out of fairness for the listeners, we have somewhat of a subject matter expert here because, Jerrold, you were counsel in the Balco case, weren't you?
Yeah, Balco, which goes back to about 2003 and was still the largest sports steroid scandal, I believe, of all time. And that was the one that involved Marion Jones and Barry Bonds. I had the first athlete that was subpoenaed to the grand jury that was convened out in the San Francisco area to investigate the Balco crimes, the alleged crimes. And Kelly White was somewhat a pedestrian track and field professional athlete, but she had risen meteorically over the summer of 2003, won the 100 and 200 meters in the World Championships in Paris, which was unprecedented. But she immediately tested positive for a substance called modafinil, which was banned. But that was really just a smokescreen to get out after Balco. Modafinil was for really, it was a wakefulness drug for narcolepsy. But through that, I was then involved in going out to meet with the U.S. Attorney and the representatives from the USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Agency, and WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, and I got to see all the records they had of all this stuff, Adam, and I learned so much about drugs in sports and how it's all tested and detected, and the fact is that the users and the really good scientists are always going to be way ahead of the testers. Just
to come back to a question that Krause presented earlier, just a couple minutes ago, you asked about CBD oil, and you mentioned that right now it's legal. The problem is the World Anti-Doping Agency banned THC. So the CBD oil, we don't know from one manufacturer to another whether it has THC in it. It's not, because it's not regulated. So that's where the issue.
If Todd Harrimans was playing football today and he was using CBD, whether it was in an oil format or a pill format for therapeutic relief from pain, would he test positive in the NFL?
So I'm going to tell you the answer is going to be no, because Todd's a smart guy, and Todd is going to make sure that he knows what's in what he's using. But I can't tell you that all of the people who use it would do the due diligence that Todd would to find out what it is that he's putting in his body.
More with the Adam Malamut Show here on a Sunday night. We thank everybody for tuning in. Jerrold Colton is our special guest for the full hour, along with Adam's beautiful family joining us in studio. Nice to have everybody on board. Back in a moment.
From the Malamut Associates Law Studios, this is the Adam Malamut Show.
And back here live on a Sunday night here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Great night to be talking to the Delaware Valley. This is the Adam Malamut Show. Real people, real perspective, real opinion. Good topic tonight. We don't have to go much further. We can stay on this one topic, Adam, deep into the night if we had the time to do it.
That's right. So I want to stay on the CBD oil for just another minute. ESPN had a great article about golfers and CBD oil. And one of the issues, again, it comes down to the regulation. And one of the conversations, Jerrold, that you and I have had is how international leagues and organizations sometimes regulate different. And with golfers, there's also a different regulation, different testing between the age divisions, right?
Yeah, this senior PGA is allowing CBD, where the PGA hasn't put that in and accepted it yet.
So, as we're talking legal issues, isn't there an argument to be made that based on age, people are being treated differently?
Boy, all these things pop up, and you as a lawyer, with the way your brain spins, that there's age discrimination issues potentially brought up by that, and it's probably true. I mean, certainly the older guys probably need it more, but you're right. There's a discrimination going on against the younger guys.
We'll save that for another show. So let's move on to another serious topic, and this is a topic that has hit so many people who have not been willing to discuss it. And unfortunately, the taboo issues around this topic have probably caused more people to be victimized than necessary. But let's talk about domestic violence. Let's talk about domestic violence as it occurs with professional athletes.
It's such a tough topic, Adam, because it's to me as offensive a thing as there can be. Just about a man putting his hands on a woman is really what we're talking about, although it involves children at times as well. And it's not just limited to men, but when we're dealing with athletes and what people think about, that's what we're talking about. And I've had the privilege of having one of my clients be a real leader as a spokesperson, both against domestic violence as well as to educate people about the perils of domestic violence. His name's William Gay. William played 11 years, 10 with Pittsburgh Steelers, 1 with the Arizona Cardinals, recently retired. Now he's a member of the Steelers coaching staff, but he has been such an outspoken proponent and a really great face for the NFL and the NFL spokesperson against domestic violence, because William suffered a tragedy when he was 8 years old, and his mother was killed by William's stepfather, who then killed himself. So in one day, William became an orphan. And he did not know at the time that his mother was terrified of his father or stepfather and had a restraining order. And we know, Adam, in the law that sometimes restraining orders, although necessary, don't really protect people. And so he became a real proponent in favor of the victims of domestic violence. And he on his own started going to all these women's shelters for the battered women in Pittsburgh. And it took about 5 years so everyone started to hear about it, and that's when he kind of blew up to become a spokesperson, not really looking to it. He was just looking to help people and be the hero. But he looks at it as his obligation to help educate other players. He wants them to know about it, and that's why we've seen so many bad examples of the abuse. Now, I think most of the players are very responsible, but the ones who aren't and don't get that message really kind of ruin it for everybody. And we've seen with a guy named Kareem Hunt last year, a video emerged of him kicking a woman while she was down and hitting her. And the NFL penalty for that was an 8-game suspension. A few years back, we saw Ray Rice, and that was handled horribly by the league when there was a video of him punching his now wife, but literally punching her and knocking her out, because they have evolved with rules and regulations how they handle these things, but they were really slow and behind it, and there's a whole lot of outcry that maybe a guy who is charged with this should never have the right to play again.
You know, what's troublesome is these videos go viral, and, human nature, people are interested in other people's misfortunes or other people's issues. Here you have videos going viral of a woman being knocked out in an elevator, and the gender really shouldn't make a difference, because you shouldn't be putting your hands on anybody in an elevator, but getting knocked out in an elevator, and the way the league responded to that, in my mind, just sends an absolutely terrible message to all the young fans. So as I'm sitting in the studio and I'm looking at my 2 children, and I'm thinking about what I want them to take out of professional sports and being a fan, I could tell you it certainly isn't watching videos like that.
There's no question. That part about being a role model is important. And I really do think, Adam, that most people get it. You made a reference, we were talking before the show, to someone like Chris Long. And there's a lot of Chris Longs. He's the extreme because he's unbelievable. But there's a lot of guys who do a lot of good
work. I want to clarify this. Chris Long in a positive way.
Yes, exactly. Right. And that there should be more like him. But there are a lot of guys who do a lot of really good stuff. Unfortunately, the bad ones really do kind of spoil it in a lot of ways for everybody. And when you see a video that sickens you of a professional athlete, strong in shape and everything, using his strength and power against a woman, it's just so abhorrent. But these are things that why education is so important, and that's why William Gay, who, by the way, we talked about, the equality of women in pay. He's actually marrying a track athlete named Natasha Hastings, a 2-time gold medalist, and boy, what great breeding potential they have of future athletes. But he has so much respect for women and all the things they do. But I agree with you, Adam. It's so horrible to see these videos, and hopefully, if the penalties are harsh enough, maybe that's the wake-up call some of these guys need.
I think that's the point, because you cannot regulate with 100% accuracy an elimination of the act. You just you cannot control that one individual who's going to cross the line. So back to your point, Jerrold, I wanted the NFL to be fast, quick, and defined. Kind of like the way Major League Baseball just dealt with the situation here.
Well, see, the lawyer hat in me also recognizes the importance for due process. Exactly. And both representing people through the years, I've been both a prosecutor and criminal defense attorney and represent a lot of athletes. I do feel the constitutional protections that are offered in this country are important. And, there is a rush to judgment when an athlete or a famous person gets charged. And sometimes that can be dangerous and at times unfair. By the same token, the punishment does need to be harsh when there is enough evidence. And you referenced the local situation. Odubel Herrera of the Phillies was charged. Major League Baseball immediately administratively suspended him until the criminal proceeding was done and conducted its own investigation. Well, the criminal proceeding resulted in a dismissal because his girlfriend did not want to testify against him, and the prosecutor did not feel they had enough evidence to go forward without that testimony. So the charges were dismissed, and the Major League Baseball acted by immediately suspending him for the remainder of the season. And listen, that's a harsh penalty for a guy who had charges dismissed. So I think we are seeing what kind of Adam is talking about, that maybe these actions that the leagues come in and take will definitely be great deterrents to people in the future.
And it really has to be driven, like we talked about earlier, from the advertisers. So if the advertisers don't have the tolerance for the behavior, they don't want to be associated with a league that isn't controlling its own house, right? It's not running its own house. You may see them start to peel away. And look, at the end of the day, we know that sports are all about money from the business side. So the advertisers start leaving, there goes the money.
Well, they're not leaving.
No,
they're not. Jeffrey Lurie and the other teams in the National Football League just got their check from the league, from the revenues for this season. I mean,
unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, about almost $9 billion in total revenue, the national revenue shared. That doesn't include the local revenue, of which Adam Zenzo's seats go towards, and a whole lot of other
but
things.
I'm going to stop talking to both of you guys. So the problem you have there is they're writing that check, but there's got to be conditions attached to it. And I think you're right. I think that the way that Odubel Herrera was treated by Major League Baseball, I think that that's starting to turn the corner. But that's just one incident. There's been so many other incidents. And one of my concerns is there's disparate treatment between the incidents. So somebody who's more of a star, maybe less of a headache for the league, maybe they treat them differently, right?
No question. There's always a double standard. And Odubel was a guy that was a little out of favor with the Phillies in the first place. It would have been interesting if it was a more successful, bigger name player right now.
In a perfect world, as far as Odubel, when the charges were dismissed from him, should that have ended the suspension with Major League Baseball?
Now we're talking collective bargaining agreements.
And there are two separate issues. Major League Baseball has a right to investigate on its own, which they say they did, and impose penalty regardless of the criminal outcome. So if they felt that there was a domestic incident that called for a suspension, they are entitled to act. But we do get into due process issues. I would imagine we will see, and it's something that they won't want to go public, but the Players Association is likely challenging that suspension quietly behind closed doors at MLB.
So we're going to take a break, but when we come back, before we leave this topic, and this is a very important topic, as are all the other topics we're discussing, but before we come back, or when we come back, rather, I want to talk about morality clauses and what individual teams can do as it relates to discipline and the way players are representing their organizations.
This is the Adam Malamut Show on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT.
Local lives here. Talk Radio 1210, WPHT. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion. Now back to Adam Malamut.
And good conversation on a Sunday night here on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT. Final segment of the big show, Adam.
Thanks, Krause.
Goes quick, doesn't it?
It sure does. And during the break, Jerrold and I were just talking about any one of these issues could be not just a show, but probably a 4-hour show. They're endless. So morality clauses we've seen in entertainment contracts, we've seen in sports contracts, we've seen these clauses that deal with people's behavior. And Jerrold, tell us a little bit about your experience with morality clauses.
Well, there's personal conduct clauses in all of the sports contracts now. And the sports contracts, for the most part, are all standardized collectively bargained for language. And basically, the personal conduct policies are pretty broadly worded now, Adam, to give the commissioner and the clubs great discretion. Now that's perilous at times for the players, but they want to have great discretion as to what they can do. Punishment. The punishments are still part of the collective bargaining agreement. The players always have the right to be represented by the Players Association or a representative of their choice. But the language has gotten pretty vague. There's always been interesting language added to contracts. It used to be certain prohibited conduct off the field, which also included dangerous activity. And the only time I ever actually probably didn't do what a client of mine wanted was a club didn't want one of my clients to ride a motorcycle anymore and put that into the contract, and he wanted me to take it out. But I agreed with the club, and I never told him that I couldn't get it out. But I probably violated a little obligation of it. I thought I was looking out for his best interest. But now they've standardized the dangerous activities, so we don't even negotiate those anymore. Although I just saw Josh Norman of the Washington Redskins jumping over a bull in Pamplona, which I'm sure the Redskins weren't too happy to see. Fortunately, he landed safely. But regarding the morals clauses, that's really broad discretion, and that allows the commissioner a lot of latitude in punishing players.
As an Eagles fan, I think the Washington Redskins should do some team building with the running of the Bulls.
I mean, a star quarterback running with the Bulls and jumping over a bull, that is definitely outside the permitted conduct, but he landed safely.
So my brother Larry's a diehard Washington Redskins fan, and I talked earlier about people taking joy in other people's misery. That is the one exception to where I will take joy in misery. When I watch the Washington Redskins get stomped by my Philadelphia Eagles, I take joy. So we saw the morality clause a little bit with Kellen Winslow, right? Wasn't there an issue with him?
Were you talking the Kellen Winslow II, who
recently
recently got
tight
sentenced?
end.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a sordid past of over a couple of decades of incidents, unfortunately. And a guy I knew a little bit, but it's one of those things where you know somebody, but you don't really know him because he clearly has some serious issues. And he just was convicted of a sexual assault on an elderly woman and is going to spend a lot of time in jail, and rightfully so. But he really ran into his problems, Adam, after his career was over, and has ruined his name and hopefully not his father's as well.
Yeah.
He shares it.
Yeah, it's a shame.
But
sure that's not how his father saw things unfolding.
Yeah, no, it has to be horrible as a parent and somebody who was a star. Kellen Winslow II was a star. But Adam, the fact is that both the leagues and the players' associations have recognized the need to hold the players accountable. And, whether it be wearing the shield of the NFL, there's a privilege, whatever sport it is, they have a high accountability now. And you're seeing although Odubel was punished after charges were dismissed, he was harshly punished. So they are really raising the standards of personal conduct off the field in every sport.
So, Jerrold, I want to finish this show by talking about some of the awesome things that you and your clients have been involved in. One of my biggest issues, though, before we get to that point, is we've got these great messages. We've got, the Chris Longs, the Malcolm Jenkins. I'm using Philadelphia athletes as an example, who get out there and they make their statements for social justice, we'll call it, as a catch-all. And my concern is that message dies on the vine. There's nobody carrying it from there. And what I believe, and I'll be a shameless self-promoter or a shameless promoter for my daughter. What I believe is it starts at home, and we've got to educate our kids. Our kids have to feel that sense of obligation to the community, and if we're not having these discussions at the dinner table, all the work that these athletes are doing, that oftentimes they take a lot of slack for having the conversation on the field, and people say, well, it's sports, they shouldn't be bringing this up. What's it have to do with anything? Look, you take advantage of the microphone where you have it. So in that vein, I'm very proud. My daughter, Ava, came to me one day with an idea, and it wasn't an idea that was in development. She came to me and said, hey, Dad, I made a website. And I thought, well, that's great. That's one more thing that I can't do that she's now able to do. And she walked me over to the computer and she showed me her activism diary. And on Instagram, it's my_activism_diary. and I'd urge people to check it out. Ava is talking about things that are important to her, and her most recent post was Cameron Boyce and his untimely and unfortunate passing, and epilepsy. She's got a For Ocean post, which I'm wearing the bracelet right now. She's got a Pride post. She's got posts about autism. She's got posts about straws in the environment. I'm incredibly proud of her, and got to talk about the parent, who's the teacher becoming the student. We have so much to learn from our kids, but these conversations have to be had around the table. So before we conclude the show, there's so many things that you've done that you're proud of. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your clients, their foundations, and the role that you've had, and how you've been able to take people's interests and help them really promote them.
Well, you should be proud of your daughter, because it's pretty impressive what your middle-aged girl is doing. Middle school age girl.
I'm not that old, Jerrold.
And I checked out her stuff, and it's really, really impressive, and the passion she brings to it. But the athletes have such a platform, Adam, and such an opportunity to do so good, whether it's be social causes or other causes. I mean, you started the show talking about the tragic storm down in New Orleans, and certainly in 2006 or 2005 when Katrina hit, it decimated that city, and the New Orleans Saints football team had so much to do with reviving that community. Sports can help so much in so many ways, and I have been really fortunate in my career to represent some really special people who have recognized their obligation and responsibility in the platform they are given. My first client as an agent was Boomer Esiason, then a star quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, now into about his third decade of a second career as a very successful announcer. And he had a very personal cause. His son Gunnar was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis shortly after his first birthday, and Boomer poured himself into that, and he has raised personally over $200 million for cystic fibrosis. He has changed the face of a disease through research and all sorts of other things. And when Gunnar was diagnosed, Adam, the life expectancy was 18 years. I'm happy to say Gunnar is now a 28-year-old, unbelievably successful young man, and now there is no life expectancy attached to it, and there's been all sorts of transformations, and he still suffers a great deal, but Boomer's still passionate about it. He's done so much for that disease. I have had so many other clients with their different causes, educational causes, women's rights causes, and a whole bunch of other things, where athletes who recognize the opportunity while they're playing and people want to know them can do so much good, and a lot of them do.
Well, listen, we're going to do this again, because this was an awesome show. And Jerrold, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I want to encourage the athletes out there, and we've got a lot of friends who are athletes who I know tune in only because we've begged them to tune in. But I want to encourage them to keep doing the great work, know that it's not falling on deaf ears, and knowing that if our listeners give them a little bit of assistance, what they're doing is going to make a difference. So thank you. Thank you, Krause. Another great show. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in tonight.
And with two lawyers in the room, I'll end the show tonight with a quote from former Chief Justice Earl Warren, who once said, "I always turn to the sports page first. The sports page has nothing but man's successes. The front page cites all of our failures." That's going to do it for the Adam Malamut Show here on a Sunday night.
He wasn't reading Philadelphia sports pages, obviously.
WPHT. As we end the show tonight, one last call from Harry on Ryan Howard.
Well hit. Is that number 5-0? It is out of here. 50th home run of the year for Ryan Howard. And this game is tied at 1 as a big guy. There's number 5-0. Continues his torrid pace in hopes, hopefully, route to an MVP season.
This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management. HT 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 or its